Our top story for tonight, Nick Chubb is looking like a beast, benching a ridiculous amount. The hype is starting for Nick Chubb. And I've brought on AFC North, Steve McCray. He is one of the writers for our Player Profiler News. He's going to give us some insight, some thoughts. I'm going to also go back and forth with him about what this division looks like with regard to T. Higgins, Keaton Mitchell, who is the wide receiver 2 for Pittsburgh, all of that and more right after this. All right, Steve, you've been crushing it for us here at Player Profiler News, focusing on the AFC North. Which of these teams, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, or Pittsburgh, which one do you think has the biggest storyline this offseason? Which one sticks out to you the most, or maybe is one that you're monitoring the closest?
I would probably give it to Cleveland. Part of it is I think Cleveland's actually I haven't gone really through fully, but I think Cleveland is my Super Bowl pick from the AFC side. I love that defense. And I think at this point, it's just Deshaun is going to become Deshaun. I don't think he's going to be the Deshaun that we're used to when he was in Houston, but I do believe Deshaun will show some signs. And, and we're obviously going to talk about Nick Chubb, but I just think this team it's due. This is a team that has built from the foundation. They've built the defense. This team has the ability to, I think, potentially go all the way. And it's a tough division. You've got obviously the reigning MVP in Lamar Jackson, who's got a nice little fun running back now in his team. Obviously Pittsburgh with their new quarterbacks. And then you've got the whole contract situation that's going on in Cincinnati. So it's going to be a fun division to watch, but I squeak it out a little bit with Cleveland.
Ooh, anytime that you got Myles Garrett on the defensive line, look out. That team is always going to compete. They're always going to put pressure on the offense to make a play and to beat one of the best defenders in the NFL. We'll stick with Cleveland, and we'll talk about Nick Chubb to begin with. We saw the viral video. If you haven't seen it, it is amazing. It's beautiful. You love to see it. But this doesn't have to do with cutting and agility and the quick lateral movements that we've seen from Nick Chubb. Chubb has been an absolute beast for not only fantasy, but they love him in Cleveland. He is a bedrock. They brought him back. They could have cut him this offseason and saved a significant amount of money, but instead they renegotiate the contract. They bring back Chubb, and he's putting out videos like this. Is it just that Nick Chubb is built differently, or are you tempering expectations about how Nick Chubb is going to contribute to Cleveland even immediately?
Yeah, I don't think Nick Chubb has to contribute right away. I think Ford actually showed last season that he's able and capable of being someone that has the ability to really handle the rock, be able to really hold off, the fact that they don't have to be concerned with it. And I think, watching Nick Chubb pretty much squat a bus is good things to watch. But, again, like you mentioned, the lateral movement, I'm hoping Nick Chubb does have that Adrian Peterson-like healing ability where he comes back and he's super strong and nothing really changes. I think Cleveland's smart. I'm glad that they did what they did by keeping him there. It showed I think from the front office point of view, I think it was awesome. I think that's a great thing to see a front office treat their players right. Because like you said, they could have gotten rid of him. They could have moved on, stick with Ford. But this is great. And it's great for the fan base. It's great for everyone from Cleveland to see that. But I think realistically, Cleveland should ease him in. And really, I think he'll be full force probably into October. I give it a 3 to 4 week Ford show and, getting Chubb in there a few times here and there if he's really feeling it. And then Chubb takes over, which is where they're going to need him. They're going to need Chubb into the later half of October, November, December to have those playoff aspirations where I think Ford can be the workhorse for the first month or so and really kind of help not put the pressure on Chubb where he doesn't have to be that guy in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, we saw a spot, big plays from Jerome Ford, and it seems like he's the guy. It seems like Cleveland still loves him as the number 2. They did bring in Donta Foreman as a veteran presence. They brought in Nyheim Hines as a veteran presence, but remember Nyheim Hines also coming off of an ACL tear, and Donta Foreman has his own history of Achilles injuries that he's recovered from. And played like a solid veteran, probably a between the tackles type of guy, not much in the passing game. But Nick Chubb right now is going as running back 42, ahead of the likes of Rico Dowdle, Marshawn Lloyd, Kendre Miller, Ty Chandler. Obviously, we've seen Chubb at his peak be top 5 running back, arguably the best pure runner in the NFL. I mean, you can argue Derrick Henry along with Chubb, but for what he can offer for fantasy, it feels like depending upon what format you're playing, he is more or less valuable. If you're in a redraft league, I think Nick Chubb is much more valuable, where you can rotate in and out, go through the waiver wire, play it that way. But if you're in a best ball league, you can't really afford to take zeros for very long, win your league, and then go into the tournaments by the end of the tournament saying, you know what, Nick Chubb was the one who got me here, and yet he was a 0 for part of the season. So how are you approaching like Nick Chubb? Is it like that nuanced, or are you taking a firm stand on how you should approach Nick Chubb?
As of right now, just kind of going through, I'm transitioning from the dynasty to the redraft space. Redraft, I think Nick Chubb is an absolute value, because of the uncertainty where he's going to go, as far as into the season, where is he going to start playing? But I think once he does get going, I think his value is going to absolutely skyrocket. He's going to be treated right now as a running back 3 or 4 on your roster, which is okay, because when he does come back, he can easily be a high-end running back 2 on your roster. I don't think he'll be that RB1. I don't think he needs to be, because you're getting him at such a great value. As far as best ball, I have steered clear of Nick Chubb. Maybe if it's really late into those drafts, you start going, you're trying to see what value you can get on some of these players. Sure, I think Chubb has it. And obviously, if you are able to survive and get to those, the playoffs and to the rounds, and Chubb is going to have some value towards the end of the season, but he is somebody I've kind of steered away. And then if we talk in Dynasty, unless you're in a win now mode, there really shouldn't be any shares of Chubb on your roster at this moment. Trade him to somebody, get the best value you possibly can to somebody who's trying to win, knowing that they're going to use him for a year or 2. But I think right now the best value across all different formats has to be in redraft mode.
I agree with you there. Redraft mode is a buy for Nick Chubb, a great value there. You can play the waiver wire. You'll get some value for him, and you don't feel the pressure to need to start him right away. We like that about our redraft leagues. We'll flip the switch here to Cincinnati, and the deadline's passed, Steve. The deadline is passed for T. Higgins. No extension. He is going to be a free agent in 2025. He's going to play on the tag, and he had requested a trade this offseason. It was not honored. He was not the only Cincinnati Bengal to request a trade. Trey Hendrickson also requested a trade. It seems like the front office for the Cincinnati Bengals, they're not willing to pay up for those the secondary pieces of that team. They're willing to pay for the Joe Burrow. They're preparing to pay for Jamar Chase. But how is T. Higgins? How are you approaching T. Higgins now that we know it's very clear he's going to play for the Bengals in 1 year? Redraft versus dynasty. How are you approaching T. Higgins here?
I'm buying him as much as I can. I'm not too concerned with the fact that this is possibly his last season with Cincinnati. I don't see them re-signing him after this year. I think they've kind of just set the tone, like that's it. And when you're in a contract year as a player, obviously you're going to have the best possible season you possibly can be. And I actually, we talk about these franchise tags. Very rarely does a player on a franchise tag ever get traded. Is it possible? It's sure, to get something, because obviously, do you really want to give up a T. Higgins as a Cincinnati Bengal front office for nothing? Because that's what's going to end up happening. Now, there's some compensatory picks and all that just play the factor. But it's not as big of a deal. I do think T. Higgins has a great season. I think he's always had a great season. Really it's going to come down to how does Joe Burrow play? The injury bug has been something that he's had to deal with. And, he even talked about it, injuries is something that, can really, be on your mind as a player. It's something that's always going to be there, and he's got to fight those demons and try to remove that. But for me, I think the way the Cincinnati Bengals are handling this team as of right now, it's 2025 or 2024 or bust at this point. The way they're treating some of these players, to let a player like T. Higgins leave, and again, for absolutely nothing, even though he would like to have been traded, is kind of surprising. I think he's going to have an amazing season. I'm absolutely buying him because I do think a lot of people have uncertainty, and I think you can get him at a good price because he lands on a team that is looking for that wide receiver one, his value instantly goes up, and you can use him as trade bait later on, or have a top 15 to 20 receiver on your roster in dynasty. So I love where we're at in this space with him because I think some people are scared, and I think you get your best value right now.
Steve McCrory, thank you for all your work with the AFC North and looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, the Cleveland Browns. We're going to talk more about the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before we do, a word about our draft kit that just dropped. Player Profiler draft kit. Check out the promo. Here we go.
Hey, it's the Podfather. I have great news. The draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team, and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team-level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated areas. And we added a bunch of features. Individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you can take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league. The best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
That's right. Go get your draft kit today on Player Profiler. Steve, before we get into the rest of our docket for tonight, give the people a little sprinkling of what you do. Tell them about the projects you're working on right now.
Yeah. So right now I'm currently obviously working with Player Profiler, providing the best news I possibly can for the AFC North, which has been amazing. It's been some of the most fun I've done in the fantasy space. And then, of course, I do write fantasy articles for IDP guys as well. They really focus on the defensive side of things, which is always fun because that's a great way to also add some really extra spice to your fantasy space. And I do also add my own content as well in Average Joe's Fantasy Football. Just your average Joe, just someone who's loved and played this game for such a long time. And I just want to kind of give some of that insight that I've been able to do for I don't want to admit how long. So it's something I've always been doing. So again, those are kind of some things that keeping myself busy. And again, it's the best advice I could possibly give with everything that I've got.
Where can the people follow you?
So you can always follow me on YouTube as on, Average Joe's Fantasy Football. I am on X on AVG Joe's_FF. I've got some, great insight. Sometimes I do some fun stuff on their votes, different things. Just again, giving as much information I can to the people because, that's what we're here for. I enjoy, helping people out. I love when I get to see people in the comments saying how much I've helped them with their winning in their league. So that's always fun. You can always follow me there as well.
It's always great. Like when we're offering fantasy advice and it works out. Isn't that the greatest feeling? It's the best feeling.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. If I give you bad advice, it wasn't bad advice. Okay. I promise you, but I do love it. I love those comments. I think it's some of the fun part about this.
process over results, right? And that's what we drive. But Steve, let's continue on with Baltimore. It's clear who the quarterback is. There's no controversy. It's clear who the running back one is. There's no controversy. But there's been some chatter about the running backs behind Derrick Henry in Baltimore. Rasheen Ali has gotten some love, but he's coming back from a pec injury, core muscle injury. Keaton Mitchell was just put on the physically unable to perform list. Justice Hill was the quote unsung hero for the Baltimore Ravens last year, but the Ravens are without Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. There is a void, in that space. And so how are you approaching that Baltimore Ravens backfield after Derrick Henry? Are you targeting Rasheen Ali? Are you rolling with Justice Hill? Are you waiting around and buying Keaton Mitchell on the cheap? How are you approaching the second running back for Baltimore?
So I absolutely love Keaton Mitchell, and I've got him in a lot of my dynasty shares because I do think he's got a future with Baltimore. He is not someone I'm really going after, though. He's going to be definitely in the later half of the season because of, unfortunately, when his injury occurred. It was in the later half of the season, around mid to late December. He's got some stuff he's got to work through. So as far as the backup goes, right now I'm a big Justice Hill. I think his ability and how he plays is very, very, I would say, the yin-yang type of effect to Derrick Henry. And I think he's going to have some value there. Now, Ali, I do like. He's a nice little deep sleeper because I think you can get him without having to give up anything. But if I'm going to handcuff Derrick Henry in my redraft, or if I've got him in Dynasty, I've got to add somebody just in case. It would be, for me, Justice Hill. Now, I'm hoping, like everyone else, Derrick Henry does not have to worry about that. Derrick Henry has been very good at pretty much trying to stay as healthy as he can. Of course, Baltimore does have some weird mojo going on in the running back room with, unfortunately, there have been injuries pretty consistent in the last few years. But without the Gus Bus, without J.K. Dobbins, I think Justice Hill is probably going to be the guy I'm going to handcuff to Derrick Henry.
I agree with you. Justice Hill has been the guy that I've been drafting a lot. He's a last round consideration in our best ball leagues. He's free. And I know that Justice Hill was not getting a ton of volume. There was a lot of Gus Edwards, and we saw double-digit touchdowns from Gus Edwards last year. But you have to wonder, if it doesn't work out for Rasheen Ali, let's say that the Baltimore Ravens want to start him slow, kind of like how Keaton Mitchell started slow last year. And it's Keaton Mitchell placed on the PUP officially. This is the PUP, though, that he can come off of any time, technically. However, we expect that he's going to miss probably the first 4 games, given how late the ACL tear. We're not even going to play it for the people. We might have to put a trigger warning if we played that video, because it was so disgusting. Because he runs, we talk about Isaiah Pacheco running like a madman, but that was Keaton Mitchell was looking very, very explosive before that injury. I'm pulling up the Justice Hill stats right now because in 2023, Hill was RB12 in yards per touch, RB15 in juke rate, RB11 in yards created per touch, and running back 18 in breakaway run rate. And this is on a team which we expect to stay the number 1 rushing offense in the NFL. Derrick Henry, who was on the Titans and they were one of the run heaviest team, is now on this team. So the philosophy fits pretty well. And I agree with you. Justice Hill is the guy we want to target. Good efficiency metrics. And with Mitchell and Ali question mark, Hill's the guy we want to go after. Let's talk about Pittsburgh. We'll bring it home with Pittsburgh because the beat writers have been very quiet about Roman Wilson.
Yep.
And I've been a big fan of Roman Wilson in terms of what he did from an efficiency metric perspective, PFF receiving grades, yards per out run. He had some big games last year for U of M. He was a player that got the draft capital as well. We were worried that maybe he wouldn't get, day 2 draft capital, but he was drafted by the Steelers, got the draft capital. There's opportunity, there's draft capital, there's production that he had. And so all of that, but now there's silence out of Pittsburgh. We've been hearing about Van Jefferson. We've been hearing about Calvin Austin. We've been hearing about, tertiary wide receivers, but not Roman Wilson. I think this is a major red flag, Steve. How are you interpreting the crickets about Roman Wilson in Pittsburgh?
So I've actually been looking at how they're going to probably play this offense. One of the things that I'm looking at is the one player who I think secretly actually ends up having a really great fantasy season is Cordero Patterson. I think part of it is if your fantasy format rewards kickoff returns and punt returns, especially with the new rule book, I think he will be sprinkled in with that two-headed monster backfield with Najee and, of course, Jalen Warren. But I also think because Patterson was a wide receiver as well, he could actually end up having some value, really showing up because, again, they're going to try to use everybody. Now, I do think Roman Wilson, who has been very quiet, even though rookie training camps are starting to show up, we'll start probably getting a little bit more activity going on with that. I think he is the sleeper of this team. I'm not too concerned that there's nothing going on. I do think, I will say share wise, I probably have, 5 or 6 shares of Roman Wilson in Dynasty because he fell quite a bit. I think people were concerned because they're unsure how this offense is going to play with Russell Wilson or maybe Justin Fields. And obviously you've got some pretty good tight ends in Freiermuth and Washington, who everybody forgets about as well, who they drafted last season. So there, I think, are plenty of weapons. As far as I was looking, obviously depth charts aren't official. You look at, try to figure out and try to gauge where these receivers are going to be, because this is a receiver room that maybe a Brandon Ayuk shows up, with that whole potential trade that happens. Something like that might add some really wrinkle to this. But looking at all this, Jefferson is probably the most consistent player, from a past life where he actually showed signs in, LA. But I don't know. No one is talking about is Scotty Miller, who I thought had some value when he was in Tampa Bay. I thought he has very good slot receiver type ability. Again, having Wilson on the outside with Pickens, I thought Scotty Miller was actually going to have some strength into this offense. I'd like to see a little bit more in their camps and really kind of see what's going on there, because he's another player. Yeah, and they have a lot of they remind me of the Giants. They have a lot of players that are very similar. And there's nobody that really stands out besides George Pickens. So they're a room that you don't really want to go after unless you are in a deeper league, or you take that shot in the dark and grab Roman Wilson towards the 12th round that you're just trying to fill some depth pieces. But I think he does become the number 2. I think he does have value. He was great in college. I thought he should have gone a little bit higher, but for me, I'm not overly concerned. I do want to see how this rookie training camps go, because again, they're just starting up. We got 15 days or so before, the first preseason game. So it's coming real fast, which I'm excited for. But if Patterson's the one guy I have been targeting in some of my mock drafts, because I think he's going to be a nice little weapon for them.
Yeah. Let's not forget a couple years ago when Patterson was on Atlanta with new head coach Arthur Smith, there was an ambiguity about roles on that team, who would be the guy. And if you remember, Mike Davis was getting 5th round draft capital in our fantasy football leagues. And, I'll take the credit. I was fading Mike Davis the hardest. I mean, yes, it was the easiest fade, since Alexander Madison, last year, but Cordero Patterson, let's not forget, 52 receptions, nearly 70 targets, 548 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns for the Atlanta Falcons. And that was in his age 30 season. Age 30 season. So, look, he hasn't had a lot of wear and tear on his body. Yes, you were talking 350 carries over the last 3 seasons, but he wasn't used very much last year with the emergence of Bijan Robinson, the involvement of Tyler Algier. So Cordarrelle Patterson is a very interesting last round selection in your best ball leagues. He might give you a couple usable weeks, which is more that can be said than your random round 18 wide receiver. Good luck. I think Cordarrelle Patterson is a very, very interesting eyebrow raise type of player. And if we can get multiple positional value out of him, that's a good call, Steve. I like that. So you like Scotty Miller, you like Roman Wilson. You think by the end of the year it's going to be Roman Wilson? At what point is the Roman Wilson empire going to rise? At what point in the year do you think?
I think he'll end up actually having true value in the second year. I think this year it's not going to be quite there. I do think he's shown. I'm one of the few people that faded Quentin Johnston last season, but I'm high on him this year. I didn't think he was ready last year, and it showed up. And that's kind of where I feel with Roman Wilson right now. I think Roman Wilson obviously doesn't have the draft capital, so I understand that it's a factor which has helped him kind of fall, but he's not someone that I have high expectations this season. But I do believe he will be someone that is going to have a name in year 2 and beyond. And that's where I feel, again, like Quentin Johnston. I think this is his year to really show up, even though he really ruined a lot of people last season when it came to especially Dynasty because of what ended up happening. But sometimes I think we're all spoiled to the fact that we had players like, Justin Jefferson and Chase and some of these rookie receivers come into the league and they're just dominating. That wasn't always the case. It is a little bit easier for receivers to come from college to the pro level compared to, say, like a tight end. But I think sometimes we're just so spoiled with some of these receiving, really monsters like Garrett Wilson and Olave and all these guys. I do think we just have to be a little bit more patient with some of these players that didn't come from schools like Ohio State or something like that.
Well, speaking of an Ohio State quarterback, we'll put a bow on our conversation with Steve McCrory of Average Joe's Fantasy Football and the Player Profiler News Channel. Steve, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, it seems like Russ is in the pole position to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are the chances that Justin Fields plays the majority of the season?
I don't think that quite happens. What I would love to see happen, though, is they do packages for Fields. Let's think about the Tim Tebow days. You had him come in, you make some plays here and there. I would love to kind of see that happen. I am a fan that I think Fields did not get the treatment he needed in Chicago. If you gave him the roster that Caleb Williams fell into right now, Fields would still be the quarterback. It's just, I believe that truly wholly. But I think Fields needs this year to kind of sit behind Russell Wilson, truly behind a veteran, professional Pro Bowl, Super Bowl winning quarterback, get his, just his cadences, get his footwork, get everything right in that aspect. And Fields will be a absolute amazing quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. This year, I don't expect a lot unless an injury happens to Russell, but I would love to see Justin Fields in packages. I'd love to see him in the games, but not necessarily starting all the time. I just want to see him on that field making some plays.
All right, you guys heard it here from Steve McCrory of Average Joe's _FF on the X Machine at Steve McCrory _. Steve, anything else for the people to close it out for the night?
No, man, I'm super excited. Again, we are about 2 weeks away before preseason. Training camps are opening up. I mean, that's that calm before the storm. I'm super excited. This is my favorite. This is my Christmas time. I'm ready. I am ready for fantasy football. I'm ready for regular football. College football just came out. Everyone's all excited. We're ready to go.
We are ready to go. And make sure you guys are checking out playerprofiler.com/news, where you can see Steve and the rest of the Player Profiler News team's work. Also on Player Profiler News YouTube channel. Steve, thanks again for checking in on Player Profiler today. On behalf of Steve, I'm Bradley. Until next time, good luck in the fantasy football streets, everyone.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.